Welcome back, friends, to A Daily Walk. It is Thursday. All right, Thursday. What's happening this week? How you doing? Listen, if you enjoy these daily walks, let us know. We always appreciate the comments. We got some great comments. Not too long ago, we had asked, hey, where are you from? We got Oklahoma, Kentucky, Iowa, California, all different places around the states. Man, thank you so much for tuning in and sending us a message. We love y'all and are grateful to be able to come into your living room, your office, your car, wherever you're at on a daily basis here on A Daily Walk. So God bless you. Thanks for sending us messages. We get them. We love them. It keeps us going, really. Today, still in 1 Corinthians 7, taking it one step at a time. These are serious things that Paul is talking about marriage, talking about the sexual relationship within the marriage, that God's direction for it, purity, etc. Paul kind of shifts gears a little bit because after he has commented on one of the questions that he was asked, he now begins to kind of share his heart in the matter. And he says in verse 8 of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, but I say, let me just share my heart with you on this. I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, then let them marry. It's better to marry than to burn with passion. This is a passage that could be easily misunderstood. You think, wow, Paul really is a hater when it comes to marriage. It seems like he really is not into it. But if you can't keep it together sexually, well, I guess it's okay. You should probably get married. That's not what Paul's saying. Paul's passion and desire was to serve the Lord with everything that was within him. And so he's just giving a perspective to the unmarried and even to those widows by saying it's not a bad thing right now that you are unmarried because it presents you with opportunities that you would not normally have if you were married. And he's going to talk more about that as he goes on. But the fact of the matter is, as a single person, see, sometimes people, and let me just share with you singles out there, it's good to be single-minded in terms of like, I'm going to serve the Lord. And if you have a desire to be married, God knows that desire, and he can bring you the right spouse. I always encourage single people, concentrate on being the right person, and God will bring you the right person. Be like the person you're looking for. You wanting somebody that's pure? Be pure. You wanting somebody I want somebody that's really healthy and in shape. All right? Then you be that person. You know what I mean? Well, we have these expectations of what we think we want, but are we that ourselves? It's important to consider that. But in your singleness, don't lose sight of opportunity to serve the Lord. Some people I'm single and my life. You can serve the Lord in the ways that married couples and with children can't. For me, I can't just pick up and go do something for the Lord whenever I don't have that kind of time, especially when I was raising a family. My wife and I we had 4 children. So the thought of just, taking off and going to do something, I had responsibilities. They were a blessing. I had to provide for my family, and I'm grateful for it. But I didn't have the same kind of freedom that I had as a single person. So what I'm saying to you is, if you are in that place, and Paul seems to be exhorting along these lines, use it for the glory of God. Leverage this opportunity that God's given you as a single person to just serve the Lord, just to jump in. And God knows your desire, and He'll meet that desire in His timing. But in the interim of waiting, wait actively, serve God. Do everything you can right now, because there's going to come a time when you won't have that same kind of freedom. And so Paul was encouraging the widows and the singles, let's serve the Lord. Let's glorify God in this season that we're in. It might not always be this way. And then he basically says, listen, if you want to get married, you can. It's not like you can't get married. You only can stay single. You need to be celibate your entire life. I don't want to be celibate my whole life. Well, okay then. God knows that. And He knows where your spouse is. He knows your address, and He can bring you together. So I encourage you, as you seek the Lord, He'll provide that other person. But you move on now to verse 10 of this same chapter. Paul says, now. So here's a new thought. Now, to the married, this is to the married people, I command, yet not I, but the Lord. So this is, I'm saying something, but really this is the heart of the Lord in this matter. This is with apostolic authority. Paul says, let me explain this to you, married people. He says in verse 11 or verse 10, a wife is not to depart from her husband, but if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and a husband is not to divorce his wife. Heavy question here. Response from Paul. Let me begin by saying God's original intention from the beginning. One man with one woman for life. That was God's intention. Divorce was not something that was part of the original plan. God wanted one man, one woman for life, not divorce, not to be split apart, not to be broken. In fact, in one portion of Scripture in the Old Testament, it says God hates divorce. And yet, the Bible also says that there are occasions, sadly, when there is an allowance made for divorce. Again, God's original intention, a wife isn't to depart from her husband. They're to stay together. They're to be reconciled. That's what God desires. No matter if you're going through a hard time in your marriage and you find yourself just at separate ends of the house and just at odds, and God desires reconciliation. Get some biblical counseling. Get with somebody who can walk you through this and you can work through these things. But there are some things that have taken place, sadly, that are irreparable. And everybody has their opinion on the subject of divorce. But from the very beginning, Paul just says, this is the Lord's heart, that a husband and wife should stay together, not divorce. Well, then I can hear it on the other end of this filming. Well, what about this? And John, what about that? And what about, you could fill in the blanks, and everybody has their perspective on this particular subject. God does make allowance for that which is not part of his original design because of the sinfulness of men and women. And that's the best I can say it. God's original intention, not divorce, but divorce is allowed in certain cases when sinfulness is involved. In fact, Jesus was asked, it had to do with the hardness of heart. Again, there's a lot that could be said on this particular subject, but the bottom line, the starting point, and we'll continue tomorrow, is divorce wasn't part of God's plan. God desires that husbands and wives would be and stay together and be one. But there are certain cases where that doesn't happen. And I want to say to you, just by way of just leading into tomorrow, that if you're in that place where that's happened to you, maybe you didn't want it to happen. You tried to fight against it happening, and it happened. You don't have to be condemned. There is forgiveness and restoration, and God can work. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. I want to leave on a good note and keep you in that space of God desires a blessing over your marriage. That's his design. And there's things that you can work through if you allow him to be involved. Love you guys. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.